In 1924, a man sat in a prison cell and wrote a book. In it, he explained, in plain language, exactly how he would start a war and who he would kill. He printed it, signed his name to it, and sold millions of copies. And the world chose to believe he didn't really mean it. 14 years later, 70 million people were dead. They had been warned, and still, no one stopped it. In 1918, the First World War ended. Germany surrendered. A year later, the most powerful nations on Earth sat around a table and wrote a peace treaty designed to make sure Germany could never start a war again. They took its territory. They took its military. They crushed its economy under a debt so vast it would take generations to repay. And they forced Germany to accept something worse than defeat: blame. Full, sole, unconditional blame for a war that every major power had helped start. By the 1920s, Germany was broken, savings wiped out overnight. By 1923, a single US dollar was worth 4.2 trillion German marks. People auctioned their furniture to buy a loaf of bread. Teachers and engineers begged for work as day laborers. Families burned banknotes in their stoves because the paper was worth less than the firewood it replaced. A broken country doesn't look for a leader. It looks for someone who can give its rage a voice. And that voice belonged to a man named Adolf Hitler, a failed artist, a decorated but low-ranking soldier from the First World War. What he had was a voice and rage that sounded like his country. In 1925, he published a book. He called it Mein Kampf, My Struggle. In it, he laid out everything, not vaguely, explicitly. He wrote that the German race was superior, that Jews were not citizens but parasites, the enemy of civilization itself, that Germany's suffering wasn't its own fault but theirs, that democracy was weakness, that Germany must expand by force, take land from lesser peoples, that war wasn't a tragedy to be avoided, but nature's way of separating the strong from the weak. He didn't hide any of it. He toured the country promoting it. Foreign governments read it, journalists reviewed it, diplomats discussed it, and the world decided he didn't really mean it. He meant every word. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, legally, through elections. Within months, he had dismantled democracy from the inside, banned opposition parties, silenced the press, built a secret police, turned a republic into a dictatorship. Then he started doing exactly what he said he would do. In 1935, he announced Germany was rebuilding its military in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. The world protested, in speeches, through diplomatic channels, and did nothing else. In 1936, he sent troops into the Rhineland, a strip of German territory that the treaty had declared a demilitarized zone. It was a bluff. His generals were terrified. The German army was still small, still weak. If France or Britain had pushed back, even with words, Hitler later admitted it would have been over. He would have had to retreat. Nobody pushed back. So he took another step, and another, each time watching carefully to see if anyone would stop him. Nobody stopped him. In March 1938, Hitler marched into Austria. No battle, no resistance. German troops crossed the border and were greeted by crowds throwing flowers. Many Austrians cheered. They wanted to be part of something bigger. Just like that, Austria was gone. The rest of the world issued statements of concern, strongly worded letters, official disapproval, then moved on. Hitler was now looking at Czechoslovakia, a small democracy carved out of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire with a well-equipped army and alliances with France and the Soviet Union. Along its border with Germany lived 3 million ethnic Germans in a region called the Sudetenland. Hitler demanded it. He said he was protecting German-speaking people. He said this was his last territorial demand in Europe. He had told them what he would do. Now, the world had to decide what to do about it. In September 1938, the leaders of Britain, France, Germany, and Italy met in Munich to decide the fate of Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was not invited. Think about that. 4 foreign leaders in a foreign city carving up a country that wasn't in the room. 3 million people, and not one of them had a say. The British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, flew to Munich believing he could negotiate with Hitler, believing that if he gave Hitler what he wanted, there would be no war, believing that reasonable men could find reasonable solution. He handed Hitler the Sudetenland, as if it was his to give. Chamberlain flew home to London and stepped off the plane waving a piece of paper, the agreement Hitler had signed. He stood in front of the cameras and said 4 words that would haunt history: "Peace for our time." The crowd cheered. The newspapers celebrated. Europe exhaled. 6 months later, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. All of it. The agreement meant nothing. The piece of paper meant nothing. The handshake meant nothing. Chamberlain had lived through the First World War. He would do almost anything to avoid another one. And Hitler knew it. Fear was the only weapon he needed. Someone else will stop him, they thought. It won't go that far. He'll be satisfied eventually. They were wrong about all of it. He was never going to be satisfied. Then came the moment that stunned the world. In August 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, 2 nations built on opposite ideologies, 2 leaders who had spent years calling each other the greatest threat to civilization, signed a non-aggression pact. Hitler and Stalin, sworn enemies, had become partners. It made no sense. It wasn't supposed to make sense. Because buried inside the pact were secret protocols, an agreement to carve up Eastern Europe between them. Poland, the Baltic states, parts of Romania, entire nations divided in advance on a map they drew in private. 2 dictators had quietly agreed to dismantle half a continent. September 1st, 1939. Germany opened fire on Poland at point-blank range. The Second World War had begun. Tanks crossed the border from 3 directions. By daybreak, bombers were over Polish cities. The world's first blitzkrieg had begun. Poland never had a chance. Germany didn't even call it a war. They called it a police action, a response to Polish provocation, a regrettable necessity. Poland fought. It fought hard, but it was outnumbered, outgunned, and within weeks attacked from the east by the Soviet Union as well. Caught between 2 of the largest armies on Earth, Poland fell in 5 weeks. Britain and France declared war on Germany 2 days after the invasion, not because they were ready, but because there was nothing left to give. Every concession had been made, every line had been crossed, every piece of paper had been torn up. 20 years, 6 months, and countless warnings after the Treaty of Versailles, Europe was at war again. And it lasted 6 years. It was fought on every continent except Antarctica. 70 million people died. The Soviet Union alone lost 27 million. Cities were flattened. Cultures were erased. A generation was consumed. And then there was the thing that set this war apart from every war before it. The Holocaust. 6 million Jews, men, women, children, murdered. Not in the chaos of battle, not as collateral damage, deliberately, systematically, industrially. Transported in trains, documented in ledgers, killed in purpose-built camps designed for nothing else. And the killing was only part of it. In those camps, doctors performed experiments on living prisoners, on women, on children, on twins. Human beings treated as material, as if the idea of humanity itself had been suspended. This wasn't madness, it was policy, organized by bureaucrats, approved by officials, carried out by ordinary people who followed orders. This was the most preventable war in human history. A man told the world exactly what he would do. He printed it. He toured the country promoting it. He gave speeches no one could misunderstand. And the world, with all its information and all its power, chose not to listen. Catastrophes don't arrive without warning. They arrive because the warnings were dismissed. Somewhere, right now, someone is telling the world exactly what they're going to do. And somewhere right now, the world is choosing not to believe them. That's not a history lesson. That's a warning.